If you're in the bottom 20%, you get a very small tax cut and you get a very large cut in Medicaid. This is a highly regressive bill that favors the wealthy and hurts the poor.
Which side are you on? Which side are you on?
Let's talk about this reconciliation bill. There's been a lot of discussion about it, and, you know, it really is very clear that this is just a redistribution of wealth from working and poor people to the bosses. And it's very, very, very frustrating. And difficult, you know, like we were talking to Maurice about, it's difficult to understand why there is not more reticence from the Republicans, given that this is going to hurt the people that voted for them. There's a clip on MSNBC evaluating some of the distributional effects of the bill that I wanted to share with y'all. Let's play this clip about the House budget.
Let's turn to your second chart with the headline simple but stark and telling. Tax cuts for the wealthy, spending cuts for the poor.
Yeah, Ali alluded to this as well, but let's put some numbers on this. If you're in the top 20% of Americans, you're going to get roughly a 3.7% increase in your after-tax income, really all from these tax cuts. But if you go all the way to the bottom and everything in between essentially leads you to the bottom, if you're in the bottom 20%, you actually lose $800. Why do you lose $800? You get a very small tax cut, and you get a very large cut in Medicaid and these other benefits that we were just talking about that affects the 20% disproportionately. So this is a highly regressive bill that essentially favors the wealthy, doesn't do much for the middle class, and hurts the poor. And then if you want to see this in stark comparison, if we simply eliminated the tax cuts for people making over $500,000 a year, which is roughly what President Biden was proposing, it would save $1.1 trillion. That happens to be just slightly more than the Medicaid cuts and the food stamps, or SNAP cuts, if you will, put together. So if we simply eliminated these tax cuts, we could eliminate these budget cuts on these poor people and end up, from a budget point of view, in the same place.
That really is astounding. I mean, just to repeat that, among the many problems, and it's not the biggest problem that I have, by far, but among the many problems with this bill is that it does increase the deficit significantly. That is what the CBO says. That's what every, expert analyst says about this bill, is that it is going to significantly increase the deficit because it is reducing revenue much, much more than it is reducing spending. And so, but you could end in the same place budgetarily if you just take away the tax cuts for people that are making over $500,000 a year and make no cuts, zero cuts to Medicaid and SNAP food stamps, zero cuts to that, and you can pay for that by just not including all of the tax cuts for people who make over $500,000 a year. I mean, that is such a ridiculously small amount of the population that we are talking about, people who make over $500,000 a year. And it is such a huge part of the population that is going to be harmed by these Medicaid cuts and the SNAP cuts. And specifically what the Medicaid cuts are coming from is they're adding work requirements onto Medicaid. It says you got to work or do community service or school 80 hours per month. And, the reason that takes so much, that cuts so much Medicaid spending, the reason that the CBO believes this will cut so much Medicaid spending is not actually that there is this army of deadbeats living high on the hog because they have health insurance. I mean, just sit with that for a second and think about the kind of just bizarre sort of situation that these people are pretending to believe about Medicaid, where they think that there are all these people who are living high on the hog because
They're
they have
living
health
so
insurance.
large, Jacob.
Because they can go to the doctor if they have a heart attack. I mean, it's just so freaking ridiculous. It's like so nonsensical. But the reason the CBO thinks that this is going to cut Medicaid spending so much is not because there's actually this army of able-bodied adults that are not working just because of Medicaid. It's because that number is actually only 3% of Medicaid recipients are long-term unemployed and able-bodied, and like unemployed without, an excusable sort of reason. I mean, 2/3 of people on Medicaid work over 80 hours a month, right? The rest of the 30%, are either elderly, disabled, in school. They have some sort of justifiable excuse why they are not working 80 hours a week. And so when you go down the list and you have some level of people who are unemployed for a short amount of time, some amount of people who are going to be back at work shortly. When you go down the list and evaluate the numbers, Matt Brunig has done a really good piece about this. It's literally 3% of the people who are on Medicaid who are chronically unemployed, who are unemployed for a long period of time, who do not have, what most people would consider to be a valid reason to be unemployed, people who are able-bodied and not working. 3% of the people who are on Medicaid. That does not account for the huge cuts in Medicaid. And so what the CBO is expecting is that lots of people who even under these requirements would qualify for Medicaid will fall off of Medicaid and will not be able to re-enroll because of all of the paperwork issues. There are going to be people who lose their health insurance despite the fact that they qualify for it because they didn't fill out the right fucking form. That's what's going to happen. And that's what the CBO is expecting, and that's why there is so many, that's why these spending cuts are so huge. And that is just insane. And even,
They've already tried these work requirements in Georgia, and it has been a total failure, but it actually accomplished their goal, which was to deny people health care and get more people off the rolls. It did not, uncover fraud or anything like that. Hell, it actually is very costly and time consuming to administer all of this bureaucracy around work requirements. So it's not even an efficient use of government funds or regulations. And you talked about how few people would actually are the unemployed, able-bodied, etc. I mean, in Alabama, that number is probably even lower. Yeah. Almost all of the folks in a state like Alabama who are on Medicaid are either children, elderly, or disabled. Mm-hmm. Almost every one of them, right? And by the way, that's 1 in 5 Alabamians. Right. 20% of our state relies on this program. And, there's just so much, the jobs that are going to be impacted. Yes. So many people are going to lose their job. There's going to be there's the issues with the Affordable Care Act and the attacks on those premiums and
That's
credits.
another one. Yeah. They're expecting 13 million people to lose their health insurance, 8 million because they're going to fall off of Medicaid, mostly not because they don't meet the work requirements, but because of paperwork issues. And then 5 million because people will no longer be able to afford the health insurance premiums on the ACA marketplace because they are allowing these subsidies to expire. And I was listening to an interview with Washington Post columnist Catherine Rampell, and she talked about how she did reporting on, and it was on the Ezra Klein show, and the title was "What Trump's Big Beautiful Bill is Really Doing." The Ezra Klein show, you can find it on YouTube. And she said that she did a lot of reporting around Arkansas when they did work requirements, and she talked to this person who he was working, and again, like I just said, not because he was not working. He was working, he had a job, he was on Medicaid, but he didn't fill out the right fucking form, and he lost his health insurance, and he had COPD. He was not able to get his medicine. And so then he had a major health incident that was a result of him not having his COPD medicine, and he lost his job. And then she said that she just reconnected with this person like within the last 6 months or something, and he fucking died, this guy, because of these work requirements that forced him out of his job. And so that's what this is going to do on a huge scale, and it is really, really, wicked stuff. And like Adam talked about, it's going to be eliminating a lot of the clean energy tax credits. I mentioned 300,000 jobs across the South. 300,000 jobs across the South. Just a huge number of people who are going to lose their jobs from this, jobs that will not be created because of this. But then there's all sorts of like smaller stuff that was thrown in, like that AI thing that we talked about at the beginning of the show. And then this person, the Catherine Rampell from the Washington Post, she talked about some more of the cuts that are targeting immigrants or using immigrants to target other people. And it is really, really just crazy, the stuff that they're doing. Let's listen to this, where she's talking about the effects that this is going to have on children.
There are other like random things in the bill that just seem to be bizarrely like, I don't know, exacting cruelty upon kids for no apparent reason. Like, again, this is really in the weeds, but already on Medicaid dollars, federal Medicaid dollars cannot be used to pay for undocumented people. Some states will use their own funds to provide health insurance to children regardless of immigration status. And the bill says if you do that, if you use your own funds to pay for these kids, then we are going to strip away all of this other money. So it's like they're basically incentivizing states to take health insurance away from children. The child tax credit is another good example of this. Again, it's like buried in the bill. Probably very few people have realized it's in there. Even though they say they are making it more generous, they're making it more generous, but basically for higher income people, and they are taking it away from a lot of children. And the way that they're doing that is that they're saying if either of a child's parents doesn't have a social security number, the child is not eligible for the child tax credit. And this does not only affect kids who might have an undocumented parent, it also affects kids who might have one parent who's here legally too. Like if you're on a student visa, you generally can't get a social security number. So if you imagine like a US citizen has a kid with, somebody who is in their grad school class, their child will not be eligible for the child tax credit, whereas in the past they would have been. And there's also a marriage penalty built into all of this too. Like if the parents in that example don't get married, then the U.S. citizen parent can claim the kid and get the credit. But if they get married, they lose it altogether. So there's like a bunch of like little things in the bill that just basically take a lot of resources away from kids, in some ways big and small, especially, children of immigrants, but not only children of immigrants. Cost shifting more of food stamps onto the states that will disproportionately hurt kids because kids make up a huge chunk of the food stamp receiving population. So there are a bunch of things like that. And I think that kind of gets lost in all of this.
Hey, 5 seconds. Just wanted to say that this is only possible because of our donors. If you want to see more of this, then consider donating yourself at tvlr.fm/donate.
The AFL-CIO put out a statement about this yesterday. This is from Liz Schuler. She said, House Republican leaders passed this shameful bill in the middle of the night for one reason. They didn't want the American people to see the deep and harmful cuts they're imposing in the light of day. This budget gave Congress a choice: stand with working people, seniors, and kids, or deliver another massive giveaway to billionaires and big corporations. Every single member of Congress who voted for this bill chose to write the richest 10% a fat check on the backs of working-class families already struggling to pay their bills. They voted to throw millions off their health care, put millions of American jobs on the chopping block, gut investments in energy jobs, raid federal workers' pensions. That's another thing that we didn't even talk about, is the cuts to federal workers, and I don't even know how much of that made it into the final thing, but that's really problematic. And reverse years of progress to protect workers' privacy, health, and safety. Even policies that should help keep money in workers' pockets, like no tax on tips or overtime, are temporary and will only help people pay the much higher costs of health care and energy bills resulting from this deal if they are fortunate to keep their coverage and jobs at all. The fight to beat this bill is now in the Senate, but working people won't give up on tough fights. Our jobs, our health care, and our families are on the line. Yeah, it's really...
Just to help the richest 2%.
Yeah, and this from the AFL-CIO on the federal worker stuff, it said that they did include in this reconciliation reductions to federal workers' retirement benefits that impose a monetary penalty on those who choose to retain their rights and then charging them a fee when they try to enforce those rights. I mean, just so gross.
And the $300 billion in cuts to SNAP food assistance, that's going to be really devastating to a state like Alabama, because what they're doing is shifting some of the cost burden over to the states. And frankly, I don't feel confident that the state of Alabama and its leadership is going to prioritize finding the money for that, if they even can, right? We're talking a significant chunk of change. I don't have the number right in front of me. I seem to recall it being in the, over $100 million range, but it's going to be a significant impact. And more than 2 in 3 households that participate in SNAP are families with children, just for the record, including many small business owners, veterans, right? It's like they're just we're feeding kids, right? And 1 in 4 Alabama children face food insecurity already with this, right? And we're talking about making it worse. There are plenty of jobs that will also be impacted through that as well. People in the food industry, school cafeterias, you name it. It's really, really devastating. And we talked about Medicaid, mentioned the ACA subsidies. I mean, I know a lot of people, that is their only way they have health care, right? Because Alabama did not expand Medicaid, which, by the way, is also another piece of this, to take away some of the incentives for states to expand Medicaid. So it is it's already been a tough fight just to try to get Republicans down here to even entertain the idea. Now we've gotten them to the point where many of them seem to think it could be a good idea, but they're worried about the cost, even though it pays for itself, according to pretty much all the research out there on it. But now, not so sure we're going to be able to say that anymore, right? Because they're slashing the federal funds that would go towards this program. I mean, and this is hundreds of thousands of people who could benefit, who could get health care, who could go to the doctor when they're sick, who could get medication that will save their life. It's really, really disturbing. And I just want to, encourage everyone to speak up. You should be calling your congressman. You should be talking to them. More importantly, I think you should be talking to other people, though. Just getting the word out to the community. Talk to the people in your network and let them know what's happening with this, to get them engaged and get them in the fight. I'm not sure if our congressman is still scared of town halls, but many of them are. So it may be hard to run into them in person. But it's going to be really important we got to fight this the best we can. And we're talking about huge, devastating cuts to programs that families rely on. And I mean, it's already not great. The United States safety net is far below many, many other countries, right? You know, you were talking about this idea of like, oh, some people are kind of living large off that Medicaid. And we've heard that also in Alabama. And, you know, politicians will be like, I don't want to expand Medicaid and help lazy folks. And it's like, first of all, it's people who are working. Second of all, how does just being able to go to the doctor when you are sick or get the medication you need to be healthy or get the surgery you need to survive, like, how is that living large? How is that living in luxury, right? Like, that is a guaranteed right in most industrialized countries, right? I mean, no one, it's baffling because in Canada or the UK or Australia or Western Europe, or right, like in all these other places, healthcare is something you are going to get. Doesn't matter. And yeah, it's a massive redistribution of wealth. You know, it's going to have a massive impact on state budgets. The state of Alabama, y'all buckle up because 2026 budget is going to be a hell of a fight. Because this is going to be really devastating to the state revenues. It will probably, I mean, I think it's going to have a devastating impact on the economy as a whole. When you talk about that many people losing their jobs, that many people, you know, being pushed into precarity and deep poverty, you know, we're looking at some major problems. And, you know, like we said earlier, it's really going to take a broad working class movement to push back against all this.
You just saw a clip from the Valley Labor Report. We are live every Saturday morning from 9:30 a.m. till 12:30 p.m. And we pride ourselves on keeping all of our content free to everybody so that we can talk to as many working folks as possible. If you support the work that we're doing, you think that it's important, you think that it's good, then consider making a monthly contribution to the project. And you can do that on our website, tvlr.fm.